We're walking through the lands of the Bible trying to find new insights to the story of the Bible. I'm glad you're joining us. We're experiencing Israel right now. Herod the Great, archaeologists know without any doubt, built this city. Took about 12 years to build it, and he completed it just before Jesus was born. And this is an amazing city. If you've ever seen the ruins here, it is absolutely a stunning work. It was his pride and joy, and he had to have water, and so this is the way he brought water to his city. Now, we know without any shadow of a doubt that Herod the Great lived, and we know all the buildings he built, and we know he built this city. And we don't have to open the Bible to know all of that. There are books written on it. And yet when you open the Bible, Luke's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 5, it's actually the very beginning of the Jesus story. After a short introduction, the first detail Luke gives us is that Jesus was born when Herod the Great was king. Now, maybe that doesn't seem like a big deal, but once you hear some people, sometimes very famous and influential people, talking about the Bible as if it's legend or fable, and therefore we don't have to listen to the message of the Bible, you know, I want to ask them, what part of this is legend? What part of this is fable? It feels like reality to me. You know, there are all kinds of people out in historical sources outside of the Bible, events that took place outside of the Bible that are recorded outside of the Bible, and of course places. And then inside the Bible you'll see brief references to them. The only way this could possibly happen is if the writers of the story were writing down actual history. You can't accidentally merge with all of that history, and it happens over and over again. The Bible's not legend, it's a historical record, and it tells the story of God's love for us. That's why this aqueduct is important.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.
This is Bruce Goddard, and you're listening to the View from a Hearse podcast. My guest today is Andy Cook. He's a friend of mine for many years, and is also a man that has greatly impacted my life. And he's also impacted the lives of literally thousands of others. His knowledge of the Bible and his ability to connect the dots with the actual land of the Bible is amazing. If you're a person who sometimes wonders if the stories of the Bible are really true, this podcast today is for you. Andy helps people experience Israel, lots of people. He takes them there physically and virtually and teaches from the actual spot the story happens. My wife and I had the privilege to join a group from our church a few years ago to make that trip. It was the hottest week of my life. But there were many chill bump moments in the middle of that unbearable heat. Life-changing chill bump moments. Andy, thank you, man, for joining us. I'm excited to introduce you to my many listeners. Andy, I think the first time I ever heard of you, it had to be, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s. I read your sports column in the Macon Telegraph. So that story in itself is amazing. I know you're a fellow Georgia dog. You got a journalism degree, other degrees since, but you started as a journalist and you worked as a newspaper columnist. So talk about that.
Well, Bruce, first of all, it's great to see you again and talk with you. You're a good friend. I appreciate your friendship. And I love what you're doing on your podcast. Yeah, back in the 1980s, I was a journalist, sports journalism, covered a lot of football games, basketball, baseball, golf and tennis were kind of along my way. And you know, I had a lot of fun for about 10 years. I told people, whatever else you want to say about it, it sure is better than working for a living. I enjoyed journalism and sports journalism in particular, and that was in Macon. You gotta be of maybe your age and my age to even remember newspapers like we knew them. That was the internet on newsprint back then, buddy.
Yeah, man, that's how you got the news. It's certainly not like it is today, right?
Yeah. It's been kind of sad to see newspapers go away, but I enjoyed those years, and God used those years, I think, to help prepare me as a communicator, to learn how to tell the story. And eventually, as we got to Israel and started doing videos, I was wondering for a while, and I said, boy, pastors all over ought to do this. You can just come here and stand by the Sea of Galilee and just talk about it, and your people understand stuff. And it took me a while to understand that, maybe God gave you the mind of a journalist and the training in journalism, kind of 10 years of special education for me, to learn how to talk fast, to come up with the story fast, because that's the whole thing about journalism is speed and learning how to communicate clearly. And, I can get off the plane in Israel and start looking at what we're looking at and say, all right, shoot that, talking to my cameraman. And we start telling the story visually now. And I thank God for those years in newspaper work. God works all things together for good, doesn't he?
Yeah, he set it up. That was not an accident for sure. You were doing what you were supposed to be doing to get set up. You've written, I know, at least 6 books. So he certainly has used your journalism to reach a lot of people. Andy, I think of the first time I met you physically, I knew you as a newspaper columnist, and I think I spoke to a bunch of preachers at a luncheon over in Warner Robins is when I first looked at you in the eye and said, I know you. I've read you for several years or many years. You remember that?
I do.
Yeah.
I do remember that meeting. I thought that was the funniest talk I'd heard in a long time. In fact, I think I invited you to speak in our church immediately.
Yeah, you did. And I came over. But anyway, that connection started. So that's been, I don't know how many years ago that was, but
it was the last century.
Yeah, that's right. We're both gray-headed. That is for sure. I also want to let you talk about Melody and your girls. I know of everything you do, there's nothing more important than your bride of many years. And I want people to understand a little bit about who you are as a person, as a husband and as a daddy and as a granddaddy now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, Melody and I have been married 43 years. We have 3 daughters. They are all married now and out of home, and we enjoy visiting our 6 grandchildren. In fact, Melody, who was a sign language interpreter, she's retired recently from the school system. Now she's free to either travel with me as I speak in churches, or while I'm gone, she often goes to see the grandchildren. And so, man, we just really are enjoying this stage of life. And you've got grandchildren, you've got a wife. I think you understand what I mean when I say, all right, so she's got the choice to travel with me to speak in a church or go see the grandchildren. Basically, I'm traveling by myself.
Yeah,
Bruce.
I was going to say, my wife went to about my first 100 speaking engagements, and she was done. Definitely, for sure. I get that. You've got, obviously, a wonderful family. You got 3 daughters, right, Andy?
3 daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm king of the house. They tell me what to do, and I do it.
So when I really met you physically, you were pastoring Shirley Hills Church, Shirley Hills Baptist Church, thriving church, huge church. I think you pastored, for 27 years? Am I right on the number? Is it more than that total?
Yeah, 20. Yeah. I had 3 different churches, so 27 total years. We were at Shirley Hills 18 years. Really, really enjoyed those years. You may remember we had walked through Bethlehem.
Yep,
the
very
Christmas
much.
event. We built sort of a movie set in the backyard. It's about 3 acres large, and we tried to recreate what Bethlehem was like the night that Mary and Joseph were there looking for a place to stay. And then we invited people to come, and you could be part of the Christmas story. You too could look for a place to stay. And it was a neat way to hear the Christmas story as you were around the animals, a bunch of Roman soldiers, walked through this plywood city, basically. But, we had it all painted up and decorated. And, Bruce, we were stunned to see how many people would come to this thing. Even the first year, nobody knew what it was, but a little bit of word of mouth. And all of a sudden, the first group told the second group, and we had 10,000 people come in 3 days. The first year we had that thing. And, actually that had a lot to do with me going to Israel.
I was going to ask that. I wondered if that's what kick-started that. Would you prepare for that?
I assumed that of those thousands of people that were coming to see our little Bethlehem, that some of them probably had been to the real Bethlehem, and some of them probably were Jewish. And I wondered if we were coming anywhere close to what the reality was like. And so I went to Israel in 1999 the first time, and I saw immediately that we had missed the mark on recreating Bethlehem. We were trying to make it real large. I called it our Texas-sized Bethlehem. You know, you could see how much work we'd put into it. But you get over into Israel and you go to the old city of Bethlehem, the old city of Jerusalem, and the streets are narrow, and there's layers of layers on top of the city, and you get lost real easy. And so we redesigned our little Bethlehem here in Warner Robins so that you had narrow streets, and we tried to get you turned around and kind of lost a little bit, and had people selling you stuff on top of you. And we tried to recreate that a little bit better. And that, in a way, is a good picture of the whole Bible and my preaching, and probably most Bible teaching outside of Israel, outside of a Jewish context. People use your own backyard to try to imagine what David's backyard looked like. People try to use the land around your home to try to imagine where Jesus walked. And when you get to Israel, as you know, from walking there, it completely changes your perspective.
Right.
And then if you get somebody to help make the rocks talk, it starts to have an impact on the Bible stories. And
for sure,
and you can bring that home to your backyard, to your neighborhood. And it really does have sort of a life-changing impact. I mean, your life will change in some ways, not just to say it was a really cool trip, but literally my life starts to change in some things that I do. I start reading the Bible differently, start treating people differently. Going to Israel is phenomenal if you can possibly pull it off.
So tell me, it had to be a major deal when you left that thriving church to walk out on the limb to start a complete new ministry called Experience Israel Now. Just talk about a little bit about what went into that.
So, you know, Bruce, the first time I went to Israel, I knew I was going to be back many, many, many times. I didn't know how I would pay for that or how this could happen. I only knew that God is able to do immeasurably more than we could ever ask or imagine. And so I started imagining some pretty big things. And then that journalism factor came into play. And we took a couple of trips with a camera and a microphone. And all of a sudden, we're making videos, and we put a few on YouTube. I was stunned at how many people would watch those videos. And then, you know, began to put some background video with my preaching at church on a regular Sunday. And by 2012, that had turned into kind of a major part of our ministry. And I was going into schools, I was going into some prisons and a few other churches, and just sharing little short lessons where we did what I like to call background video behind some Bible teaching, where we show people where a Bible story happened. And I guess that's what you might call using virtual technology. That's where the name of our ministry came from, Experience Israel Now. And only 1%, maybe 2% of the people who attend church on a regular basis will ever get there. And I thought somebody needs to bring these lessons to the 99%, to the 98%. You know, they need to experience Israel now, not when they retire and not some far distant place or time. This needs to happen now. And so we call it Experience Israel Now. And as I began to expand that ministry, and people everywhere were responding to it with such an impact, we felt like God was calling us to start a full-time ministry. It was very difficult to leave our church. It was very difficult it was scary to think about launching a new ministry that nobody else was doing. I mean, how are you going to support yourself? That's really what it boils down to. Our church had been very generous with us, and we were, you know, enjoying the really best season of our life. And yet I read the Bible every day, and I knew this, Bruce, right off the bat: God is not responsible to maintain my lifestyle. God has called me
contrary to what some people say, right?
Yeah. You know, this is not about you. It's not about me. It's about serving him. And if he calls you to do something that's going to cost you something, now, I signed up a long time ago and I said yes before I knew what the request was. And that's, now the request comes right when we're heading into the prime time ministry years. Our children are gone. Our expenses are down. We need to be preparing for retirement. And it was a frightening thing. And I'll never be able to thank my wife enough for having the faith to jump off the cliff with me one more time. I mean, we had already left one career and gone into ministry, and now we were doing something nobody else was doing. And I'll tell you the short end of this story. That's a faith thing. We had been preparing for several months, maybe even a year, that might be where we're going. And so, I did a lot of reading on how people start businesses or start ministries. And one of the things you're supposed to do is you need 3 months in the bank so that you don't have just life or death financial pressure right off the bat. If you're starting a restaurant, you need 3 months in the bank while people get used to coming to your restaurant. And so now I'm starting a ministry. So we had 3 months in the bank. And I walked up at the end of a church service and told them, I said, I need you to have a seat. I need to tell you something. And I told them about my dream. And all I really knew was, I got to go. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I've got to do what God's called me to do. And so we resigned. Bruce, again, I had 3 months in the bank personally. 1 month later, we had 9 months in the bank. And that's the kind of thing, and that's just one thing that happened in the next few weeks that showed us that God was in this thing. And here we've just come out of a 2-year pandemic where not only was Israel closed, churches were closed. My whole ministry model was just
shut down
in such a state of risk. And yet I knew from a financial standpoint, the first day that we realized how bad the pandemic was going to be, I knew I was going to survive. And we're still here. We just took a video trip to Israel, and now we're taking another trip to Israel with our first group since 2019. God has been so good, and God's people have been so generous. I'm having the time of my life, and it all comes back to that basic instruction of following God no matter what. If you're going to follow Jesus, he's the one who says, follow me. And then he turns around and starts walking. It's up to you whether or not you walk.
Right. Well, you're having the time of your life, but you're also impacting a lot of people through what you're doing. No telling how many people. My wife and I invited, you remember, her siblings or 2 of her siblings and their spouses to come that they didn't know you. They love you today. I can tell you that. And we talk about it often, that we take trips together. We used to take them every year. We've skipped a couple of years now because of COVID, but we all say that is the best trip we ever took in our life, ever. Do you know how many times you've been?
Well, I have lost count a little bit, but I think it's 21. I think it's 21. I know I've spent about a month and a half of my life on airplanes getting there and coming home.
It is a trip.
That's the worst part of the trip.
How many people have you taken to Israel, and how many people have been in your audiences? Do you have a way of the analytics to kind of know what that is?
Yeah, we keep up with that pretty well. We've taken maybe 650 people to Israel on airplanes, and just for the person who's going, what are these virtual tour presentations? What's that about? I think we all understand getting on an airplane and going to Israel. And so about 650 people. But I like to go into churches, and we either use their technology, like their screens and their projectors, or I take in my screens. And we have a rear screen projection system, and just this big giant thing. And we have more drawn video of biblical sites, we think, than any other organization. And so again, 650 people have gone on our trips to Israel, but attendance at those events where we've done the virtual tour presentations is now more than 71,000. Right. And so it's just stunning. I left a church where we were seeing about 700 a Sunday, and now I speak to much smaller congregations. But over the last 6.5, nearly 7 years, 70,000. I mean, that just really boggles my mind.
That's not counting your YouTube,
all of that's in person
that you've got going on.
We have a lot of videos where maybe I'm on location on YouTube, and that website's called Secrets from the Ancient Past. Not website, that's our channel on YouTube, Secrets from the Ancient Past. And then ibiblestock.org is a resource we're providing for pastors, Bible teachers, or just anybody that's really into Bible study. Hundreds of free photographs on ibiblestock.org, hundreds of them. And then we also have examples of the video clips that we can provide very inexpensively for a church, for a pastor, for a Bible teacher, for a Sunday school teacher, for a small group leader. We sell that library. And so if you want to show your people where David beat Goliath, where he defeated Goliath and killed him, well, we've got lots of video, drone video of the Valley of Elah and Azekah and Sha'arim, which is part of the story. Or if you want to see the Sea of Galilee, we've got drone video. We've got video from the boats. We've got video of the boats from the land. And it's just beautiful stuff. And
it's a lot of stuff. And just so you know, folks, I have also attended his multimedia presentation, and it is so powerful. I mean, you've got this drone coverage. It starts from outside. You zoom into places, and what he's talking about, you're looking at the real place. Just didn't have that kind of stuff when I was growing up, Andy. I mean, we were looking at a Sunday school book with these pictures that somebody drew. So to take you to the actual places is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, we take a professional drone pilot and we take professional photographers. We've got really good stuff. So Bruce, here's the question people ought to be asking: why is that important? Are we just entertaining Bible readers? Are we just trying to give people who already know a lot about the Bible a little more knowledge? And the answer is no. Listen, the Bible gives you an opportunity to fact check its record of history. So we live in an era where people are bound and determined to fact check anything you say. And it's easy to fact check a lot of stuff. And people get caught in saying things that aren't true. Well, the Bible says, okay, here's a story that happened, like David killing Goliath. Well, how can you fact check that? David's been gone a long time. I don't have video of David beating Goliath, but that particular chapter of the Bible, which is 1 Samuel 17, scholars call it one of the best examples of biblical geography in the whole Bible. This is not a legend. The Bible starts that story by saying, you want to see where this happened? Well, it's between Azekah and Soka in the Valley of Elah, near Ephes Dammim in Judah, which is the southern part of Israel. And the giant's going to come from Gath, which is about 7 miles away from the valley. And the boy's going to come, the teenager's going to come from Bethlehem, which is just half day's journey, even if he's just walking, but he's probably on a donkey from the story we get. And then at the end of the battle, they're going to chase the Philistines. After David defeats Goliath, the Israelites chase the Philistines from the road that led from Sha'arim to Ekron and Gath. We know where all of these places are, and we can show you pictures of them.
Right.
And so when you take a trip to Israel, you don't meet David, you don't see the miracles, but day after day, you see the places where these things happen. Day after day, you see what archaeologists have dug up. Day after day is just this constant reminder that the Bible's telling you the truth about the place. And after a while, it overwhelms you. I remember the first time I stood in front of the gates of Jerusalem. I'd already been to the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. It was a very fast trip. Listen, I was in my third church as a pastor, and I stood in front of the Damascus Gate early one morning. I snuck down there by myself, and I just couldn't help it. I said, oh, my word, this really happened.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew I always believed, but this really happened. And so when we go into churches and we give you the next best thing, it's usually what happens by the end of several sessions, people come to the conclusion of going, oh my goodness, this really happened. Uh-huh. And so now, since you were able to fact check the Bible, and the Bible was telling you the truth about the story, what are you going to do about your life if God calls you to face your own giants? You know, if you've got a giant in your life you need to tackle, are you going to have enough faith like David to trust God and just take the first few steps and go down in the valley and sling your doggone stone? Uh-huh. And you know, maybe that's the lesson you take away. Maybe it's something else.
So I can think of when I was there, so many lessons just like that. I mean, obviously you were teaching, or you had some of the pastors teaching at these different places, and it's exactly what you said happened to me. I'm looking at where it really happened, and I'm thinking of the life application. And I'll give you an example of that. That a couple of things that I've shared all over the country that was major, just unbelievable moment. I mean, people get different things from this. It's according to what's going on in your life, and the lesson that comes out. But when you're there, I remember standing in the Valley of Elah, although it was the hottest day of maybe the second hottest on that trip. But I remember how moving it was just because of what you said. You said something just then. I think people need to understand this, because I did not understand it until I went there. I'm still not sure I understand it, but I certainly understand the concept. The archaeological stuff, and people are continually finding things there. And talk a little bit about how that's done. You talk about that on those trips, because it helps you to understand how they find these places. It's not like you just walk in and this stuff is way under the earth where this stuff happened 2,000 years ago, right?
Well, imagine in your community that somehow you get the information that a great fortune of ancient gold is buried in your community. Your county, if you live in a state that has counties, or your province or whatever, and maybe you even narrow it down to your city. You know, at first you're excited because there's gold buried somewhere in, say, 20 square miles. But you know what? I'm not going to waste a minute taking a shovel around my city and just digging blindly for that gold, because 20 square miles, 10 square miles, even 1 square mile is like, oh, that's just ridiculous. And so archaeologists who are looking for the past will use every reliable source they have to try to find something. They're raising money in Europe or in America, or they're getting some grant money, and they raise 6-figure budgets to spend 1 or 2 or 3 summers digging, looking for a particular location. They're going to use every reliable source. And Bruce, I'm telling you, I've seen archaeologists do this. Even archaeologists who claim to be atheists, they all have a Bible in the backpack. They use the Bible because the Bible is like a treasure map, and they can open it up and they can narrow down where they should look to such an extent. Take the valley where David beat Goliath, since we're using that one a lot. Okay, it said Azekah, Soka, Valley of Elah, Sha'arim. There's and Gath right there. And so when they go to the Valley of Elah, which is still there, I mean, it hasn't changed in 3,000 years. And then they look around and they see a suspicious looking hill. It looks like maybe that's not a natural hill. And they can go over and do a little test digging. And sure enough, they get down and they find the ruins, and then they expand their digging. They use the Bible as a truth-telling document to help them invest their time and their money wisely. Now, why is that just so stunning? Because if you take the world's religions, all of them, they all have holy books. They all have sacred text. And without degenerating anybody else's religious beliefs in the world, I will tell you this: the Bible is the only one of the holy books that gives you geographic locations that you can use as a fact-checking element. And Bruce, I've been studying this for 30 plus years. I've been to Israel too many times to count. I've talked to archaeologists. I read every book that comes along. I read study Bibles, and I am not aware of a single location in the Bible, of the thousands of them, that has been proven wrong by some archaeologists digging down and finding something in a different location than where the Bible said it was. The Bible tells you the truth about place. Therefore, my conclusion is the Bible's telling you the truth about its history. Even if it's difficult to believe,
right,
the Bible's telling you the truth about history. And then now, if it's telling you the truth about a history of a God wanting to be involved in your life and a God who has a standard of holiness, now I'm face to face with the decision point about how I'm going to live my life. I am so grateful for the land of the Bible, whether it's in Israel, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Turkey, Greece, Italy. Listen, all of these places have sites that are mentioned in the Bible, and archaeologists are doing us a favor by uncovering them literally on a weekly basis in all of these places. And it's just amazing to watch it happen.
Yeah, I remember walking, just one example, we were in the old city, Jerusalem, going down, and we saw a sign, this is David's palace. The first thing I saw was he was up high, and he could see on the roofs of other houses. It just hits you like a ton of bricks when you know the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. So another thing you do, because I want to talk about some of these places, but another thing you do is you do a different kind of tour. I think some people go, it's kind of a bus tour, and they hit the big churches, and maybe they hit a few of these famous places, but you get people out where not many people go. I know one example, we walked that Jericho Road, and my calf still hurt from that, but it's just not a lot of tourists, not a lot of groups doing some of that stuff. So tell a little bit about your thinking about that and how that came about, because I think your tour is pretty unique.
When we take people to Israel, or when we're talking to people about going to Israel, I often say, look, the worst trip you ever take to Israel, I mean, if you take one of the worst trips, it's still going to be the best trip of your life. It's amazing. But we don't really, I don't like going into churches to remember a story. And a lot of tours will go from church to church to church, and they remember where Jesus said, on this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Or they remember where Jesus fed the 5,000. This is where we remember that Jesus prayed. Instant, I'd rather just open up the Bible and go, okay, best we can tell, it was in this area where Jesus fed the 5,000. And the Bible tells you it was at Caesarea Philippi, about 40 miles north of the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus said, on this rock I'll build my church. Why don't we just drive up there and see that location?
I remember being there too.
Yeah, of course. You don't forget stuff like that. And for a while I led tours, and I had to depend on tour companies I tried to work with them, and it took a while before I finally found someone who would let me do what I wanted to do on a tour. But what we're looking for is the Bible. If you want to put your feet on the ground where people in the Bible put their feet on the ground, that's what we're looking for. And so we do a lot of hiking around. And so we have our hiking tour, which is usually in June. I believe you went in the fall, and you've mentioned several times now how hot it was. That was the hottest trip I've ever taken in my life.
I'm glad to know that.
It was unbelievably hot. But Jesus lived through all of that, that heat. All of the people in the Bible lived through that heat. Maybe it's important to know that that's part of their life experience, because true or not, did you get thirsty on that trip, Bruce?
Yes, absolutely.
You know what? Water was a life or death matter for us just on a little trip to Israel as tourists. And when we walked on the little 2-mile stretch that leads from Jericho up to Jerusalem, it's 18 miles all the way from Jerusalem to Jericho, but we walked on a little 2-mile stretch down in the canyon, and it's an amazing hike because almost everybody in the Bible that you've ever read about walked on that road, and Jesus walked on it. He put the story of the Good Samaritan, that was the setting of it, because everybody knew that road. And we all ran out of water. I think it was about 117, 118 degrees, and we all ran out of water. So now when you read the Bible, when you hear these passages about living water, or David saying, I thirst for you, oh God, it's a completely different understanding, then yeah, I get thirsty in America, but I'm never more than a few steps away from a water spigot and I can get all the water I want. I'm not going to go to bed tonight worried about where I'm going to find water in the morning.
Right.
But if you live in the Middle East, that's a part of your life. That's part of your life.
That was a couple of things about that struck me there. One was on the Jericho Road. We stopped halfway, and you gave people, you had the option A and option B. Everybody didn't have to hike that, and this was the hiking trip, but we did it. I was thinking, if I get out of here alive, I will be happy. And that was my main go-to. I mean, when you get in, knowing I had to get back out, it was brutal. And we trained for months to go on this trip. But I'm an older guy. It was tough. So anyway, we stopped halfway, and one of the pastors, Matt, I think, taught the Good Samaritan. And my thought was, please hurry up. It's the hottest I've ever been in my life. And then all of a sudden, that story that I've heard all my life, I've been in more Sunday schools than you can shake a stick at. I can promise you that. I grew up going to Sunday school. I've taught Sunday school. I've done it all. But that story took on new meaning because we were there. And I was thinking, my mindset was, if I can get myself out of here, I will win. And I'm thinking, I can understand why the people kept walking by the man that was bleeding to death because they had to take care of themselves. Think about that. That just hit me like a ton of bricks. And when you stop to really help somebody, you got to be willing to be disrupted, not just for a few minutes. There was not a hotel around the corner he took him to. It was a major deal for him to stop and help this guy. And it's a great life lesson. I'd have never learned that unless I was sitting there helpless and thinking, he's talking, I don't care what he's saying because I just want to get myself out of here. I would not be thinking about trying to help somebody else get out. That's kind of stuff that people pick up different lessons from those things, and I'll never forget it. And then you're talking about the water. We came to Engedi. Is that Engedi is how you pronounce it?
Engedi.
And that, it was so hot. We came off the Dead Sea, I think, and all of a sudden we were looking for the place where Saul was chasing David. David was hiding from Saul in the clefts of the rocks or whatever. And we get to those waterfalls. Everybody just, it didn't matter. You took your shirt off. You took your shoes off. You stood under those waterfalls because it was living water. Oh, my goodness. The lessons there is absolutely incredible.
It is. It is incredible. And then I think one of my favorite lessons from the Jericho Road, and if you've never seen a picture of this Jericho Road, just go to ibiblestock.org and you'll see under the category of the Jericho Road, you'll see that it's a canyon, and that if you're walking along this narrow path, and imagine walking there with children, and families did walk together. This is also the road Mary and Joseph would have taken to Bethlehem, and she's expecting, it's scary because if you fall in this canyon, you're either going to die or wish you had died.
One wrong step, and it is a big drop off. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
We have people on every trip who start out on the path and they see where the path is going, and maybe they have a fear of heights or something, and they turn around and say, okay, we'll meet you back at the bus. We can't do this, or I can't do this. Right. Not many people do that because it's a safe walk, but visually it is terrifying because of this canyon thing. Well, in the Bible, there are a series of Psalms, and they called them songs because they were songs. And there's a series of them, about 14, that are said, these are the climbing songs, the Psalms of Ascent. And so now you can get into the head of Mary and Joseph. They're scared. They got to walk this road. It's the only one with water on it. And so it connects them all the way up to Jerusalem and later on Bethlehem. And there's no other path. This is no other option. They go this way, and you can hear them singing this song. You can hear them praying this song. I lift my eyes to the hills. God, if you don't help me today, we're going to die.
Yep.
I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of the heavens and the earth. And what's the first promise? He will not let your foot slip.
And I remember Stacy Green, who wife of the current pastor at Shirley Hills now, quoted that there. You had it ahead of time for her to do. it took on all new meaning. I mean, you could not get your breath in that setting to hear "Lift up thine eyes unto the hills," and it was incredible. It was just it's another one of those moments. Andy, I'll tell you another thing that stuck with me, and maybe this was the first. I think it just took me by surprise. We were at this little place. It looked little, but it was. Is it called Hazor? Is that how you pronounce it? Hazor.
Hazor.
Hazor. So we get out. We're looking around, and you see these ruins. This stuff is dug out methodically. I mean, you can tell people know what they're doing. I mean, they got to be careful when they start uncovering this stuff. But a huge project was going on there, and we were looking at these walls, but you could see where they'd been burnt. They were charred, at the bottom, and you were pointing that out. And you had me read in Joshua 11, I think it was. I don't think that was something you told me ahead of time to memorize or get ready to say. I think you told me to read it. Or you asked somebody to read it, and I said, I got it, I'll read it. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I read it.
Oh, that's good.
And I read it, and all of a sudden, I realized that it's about, Joshua coming in and burning Hazor. And here we are standing there looking at the ruins. I couldn't believe it. I said, wow. And that's something I would have missed in the Bible.
So there's another case of the land providing support for the Bible's record of history. So the king of Hazor stored olive oil in that particular building. It was the main building of the palace, and he kept his olive oil there. Well, as you know, olive oil is flammable. It's not like gasoline. It's more like diesel fuel. It's a slow burning fuel. They use it in lamps and that kind of thing. Hazor is up in the north. They weren't very far from the cedars of Lebanon. And so he had to use these great cedar beams in that palace. Now, all that's left today, of course, are the stones, the big, huge blocks that made the foundation of that particular building. So now think about it. He's got a flammable liquid in a building that's got these cedar beams in it, slow burning hardwood. And he's integrated that with all of these huge stones. And they're in the Hula Valley, which is like a wind tunnel. Every afternoon, it gets very windy there. So Joshua comes up and beats a coalition of 5 kings in the north. And it says he burned Hazor. He burned Hazor. And Joshua only burned Jericho, Ai, and Hazor. They took all the other cities as they were and just inhabited them. But he was angry at the king of Hazor, and he wanted to destroy that threat up in the north once and for all. And so you get this wind tunnel, flammable liquid, slow burning olive oil, and cedar beams. In order to burn a stone, you've got to have heat of an immense temperature. And this enclosed structure was like an oven, and it burned those stones so much so that they cracked and they discolored, and they're different from all other stones. And when archaeologists got down to that level and they spotted them, they used the Bible and says, well, here it is. And if you remember, there's a huge metal structure over that area. Israel, the state of Israel, has put a lot of money into protecting that little layer of burned stones, because it says, those stones say, look, we were here. Our people were here 3,000 plus years ago, 3,500 years ago. Not quite 3,500 in that particular story, but our people were already here 3,200 years ago. Here's a story in our religious book that says it's history, and here's the archaeological evidence that history is true. And that's where the land and archaeology and the Bible's record all merge with this power that leaves people like Bruce Goddard talking about, an obscure little passage in Joshua for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. If you could name a place or two that's probably most impactful to people you've taken there, or maybe most impactful for you.
Yeah, people ask me that question a lot. Earlier today, somebody asked me about it. I like the Sea of Galilee because it looks like my home in Middle Georgia. There's lots of grass, lots of trees. And the Sea of Galilee plays an incredible role in the Bible. You know, you can go to that northern rim of the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee, by the way, is a lake. It's not an ocean. Right. And people are usually surprised when they see how small it is. If I'm just going to be in my comfort zone, I like being around the Sea of Galilee. It's slower, more relaxed. And there's a lot of Bible stuff that happened around there. Jerusalem is where the world's most important archaeological work is going on right now. I remember the first time that I walked through Hezekiah's tunnel, never had been there before. I only had one friend with me, and we were trying to film in there. Here we were waist deep in water, usually having to duck our heads. So we had, you know, maybe 18 inches of air in parts of it because the water was very deep that particular day. We were the only people in Hezekiah's tunnel. And that's 1/3 of a mile through twisting rock. Your shoulders are touching, my shoulders are touching all the way through there. Hezekiah's tunnel is what, 2,700 years old. And there we were walking through it, through this incredible history. And we didn't really know how it was going to turn out. And it was kind of scary. And yet when I got the video back home, when we started unpacking the video, my friend and I were laughing all the way through this thing. It was just like the most incredible experience to be walking through that history. And that's happened several times now. But yeah, you can walk through Hezekiah's tunnel. The interesting thing is maybe 100 years ago, 150 years ago, there were the smartest people in Europe, the smartest professors in America would use this reference to a tunnel that Hezekiah dug under Jerusalem as a reason that you shouldn't take the Bible literally. Well, as it turns out, they found Hezekiah's tunnel not long after that. And around the year 2000, groups started walking through there more and more. And now it's really pretty common for groups to walk through there. If you know that Hezekiah's tunnel is just a few steps away from the Western Wall.
Talk about a little bit about the nation of Israel and why that's so important for us as people that profess to be Christians, for our nation.
Oh, wow. I don't know if I comprehend how important the state of Israel is. First of all, there's a lot of prophecy in the Bible and statements about the ancient cities coming back to life. And we are seeing that right now. We can take you to multiple locations like Caesarea by the ocean, by the Mediterranean. There's a stadium there that was underneath the sand when I was born. Today, they're holding concerts in that stadium.
I remember sitting in it. Yep.
You know, 3,000 people can sit there. And if you've made it as a singer in Europe, one of the ways you know it is that you get invited to sing or to play your instrument at Caesarea. That ancient city has come back to life. The state of Israel, they really got their legs under them in 1967 in the Six-Day War, and the whole world realized, hey, this little miracle restart nation from 1948 is here to stay, and they're a political force. But they also are the only democratic, you might say, voice in the Middle East. And we need, as a country, we cannot ever stop supporting this powerful little group of free people. There are even Arab people there. Israel is not completely Jewish. There are Arab Israeli citizens there who have elected representatives in their national government. And for all of the attention on the Palestinian issue and the two-state solution and all of the political stuff that goes on, the truth is Israel has come up from the ashes and has built this incredible example of what happens if you give people an opportunity to be free and to invest in their future and to invest in their children and their grandchildren. A lot of Israel used to be swampy land up there in the Hula Valley, and people used tractors and hoes and shovels and died of malaria, and they drained the swamp and they made a beautiful farmland out of that. And so you see how hard these people have worked. It's important on so many levels to support an example of people who are just willing to work hard, and they're free, and they elect their own officials, and they're in the Middle East, and they're a great military force. In fact, that one of the most popular T-shirts that's sold in Israel it says something to the effect of "Relax, America, Israel's got your back." Because their military is so strong. That's a bit of a joke, because Israel's very small, Bruce. Most people don't realize how small it is. I live in Georgia. If you divide the land area of Israel into the land area of Georgia, you can put 7 Israels inside the state of Georgia. That's stunning.
Right.
It's about as tall as Georgia, but it's very, very, very narrow. In some places, as narrow as 15 miles, and 40 miles is about kind of common. So it's in a very precarious position. We need to support it constantly. And they have their political problems. They argue, if you think it's bad with Republicans and Democrats here in America, they must have 6 or 7 parties that just are constantly at each other's throats. And, they have their issues. One of the jokes is, if you get 2 Jewish people in a room, you're going to have 3 opinions. In fact, if 2 of them agree, one of them will change his mind so they can argue. I do love Israel. I don't give them some blanket approval for everything they do. I don't give our country blanket approval for everything it does. But I do love Israel. I consider myself sort of a bit of a volunteer ambassador for Israel. I have friends who are Arab Israelis. I have friends who are Palestinians. I have a lot of Jewish friends who are Israelis. I mainly love the place because it is a gift to any Bible reader. It is a gift to any preacher, any Bible teacher, any small group leader. God's given you this gift, and you need to take advantage of it. And that's one reason we've tried to create resources for people to take the land and to help your people, your audience, experience Israel right now. Not some distant time, but I want you to use the pictures right now. That's why we give them away on ibiblestock.org. We want you to understand the lessons. So that's why we have a YouTube channel, Secrets from the Ancient Past. And then we have our regular website called experienceisraelnow.com, where people can contact me, and maybe you want to have a presentation in your church, or maybe your church has a prison ministry. I love prison ministry work. It's amazing. We go to Christian schools. I go to businesses, and share these little short lessons. If you invite me to come, there's almost a certainty we're going to find a way to make that happen. Been all over the Southeast, been to New Jersey, went to Zambia in Africa and taught in a seminary there for a week and a half, one of those intensive week and a half period, taught 6 hours a day. Just a really, really wonderful experience. So I love doing what I'm doing. I'm so grateful that you've given me an opportunity to share with your listeners today.
Andy, you're doing a great thing. And people, you heard him. If you're in a place and you've got a pastor or an organization, he just told you how to contact him. His main website is experienceisraelnow.com. His YouTube channel, all kind of videos there. Secrets of the Ancient Paths. The site where he has all the photos, just thousands of beautiful photos from Israel. ibiblestock.org. If you want to go on a trip, contact him. If you want to go to Israel physically, you won't have a better tour guide than this guy.
I will tell you this, going to Israel changed my life. It made me a better reader of the Bible. If you can go to Israel, make the investment in your life. If you know someone who has potential to be a pastor or a good Bible teacher, and you can make an investment in that ministry by sending her while they're young and have all these years ahead of them. We need to get more and more young Bible teachers to Israel. And so I'd invite people to do that. And if you can't do either one of those things, or you can't make the financial investment in your own life and go in there, then make an investment in a good study Bible. Make an investment in looking for YouTube channels that bring out the connection between the land and the Bible's lessons are the Jewish heritage that we have. You know, Jesus was Jewish and he lived in Israel, and all of the people in the Bible, you know, if you wanted them to understand your culture and your life, they would need to study where you live. They would need to study your habits, your culture, your environment, your context. Well, don't put your culture and your environment on top of the Bible. Invest in understanding that culture, invest in understanding that context. And I promise you, the Bible is going to come more alive to you than it's ever been before. And it's our prayer that as you read the Bible in that way, with that kind of energy, that it begins to change the way you live your life. It certainly did that for me.
So, folks, I said at the beginning, if you're one of those people, 1.4 billion of us in the world that profess to be Christians, if you really wonder if this stuff is really true, here's your man. Get in touch with him. Andy, thank you so much for doing this. Very powerful stuff, very meaningful stuff. Thank you.
God bless you, Bruce. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you, man. You take care.
Viewing life from a hearse, it could be worse. Laugh, think, and cry with the country undertaker.